Welcome to The Deep Dive, a special podcast edition of The Basketball Show. I'm your host, Paul Sir. I'm going to take you into new territory in your hoops journey with the best of the best in basketball experience, expertise, and analysis. The Deep Dive is brought to you by the Hoop City 3x3 Basketball Festival, featuring the top Olympic men's and women's FIBA 3x3 teams from across the world competing in the beautiful Ice Palace in West Edmonton Mall, July 31st to August 3rd. Go to 3x3ba.ca for your tournament information. Now let's take the deep dive. Welcome to the Basketball Show Deep Dive. I'm here with my good friend Ben Golliver from the Washington Post. Ben, we're just talking. You're in the desert, melting away in the Las Vegas Summer League. How's it been so far?
Oh, it's been a really good week out here. You know, the Summer League just gets bigger and bigger, you know. So you got the starting highlight of like Cooper Flagg's debut. What's he look like, right? And
Right.
some of these other lottery picks play in their first games, but that's only really one part of it. I mean, there was a big chess tournament with Derrick Rose and Magnus Carlsen, these grandmasters from overseas. They're putting on an event, kind of coincided with Summer League where all these NBA players are playing chess. You've got the Players Union is out here kind of doing meetings and, conducting the business side. You've got Adam Silver, the commissioner, talking about the NBA's expansion plans and all that good stuff, with the league's owners kind of having their summer meetings. And so, it's enough to make your head spin, right? You got the business of basketball, the fun side of basketball, and then the actual basketball on the court. You just try to keep up with everything.
Well, number one, I'm impressed that our president has inspired the NBA players to play chess, not checkers. So that's a good start, an impressive start. But like you say, though, Ben, the Summer League, and you and I have talked about this together, and of course, this is where we first made our acquaintance. But compared to 9 years ago when you and I met, it's far, far bigger. Go back 15 years, and this was just a little event in smaller gyms, right? I mean, it was a part of the NBA, but a very, very, very small part, where now it's something that keeps the NBA not just alive, but propelling them into the next season.
Well, yeah, the first one I went to was probably about 15 years ago, and they were still using the same gyms at UNLV. The difference was nobody was in the stands, And at one point, they were busing in local elementary school kids. I don't know if they were like in summer camps or something like that. And they would just have the kids sitting up in the top rows, kind of filling the seats. And they'd be screaming the whole game, regardless of what was happening on the court. They were just screaming. They're like, this is great. We get to just yell for 2 hours. So, yeah, it's definitely come a long way from there. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, Wemby sold out UNLV's gym. I mean, it's like 18,000, 20,000 seats. And just to watch a Summer League game for Wemby, Cooper Flagg drew a really big crowd this year for his first game against the Lakers and Bronny James. And so, it's become much more professionalized. I mean, they used to have almost like warm-up jerseys like you would maybe use at like a 24-hour fitness. Now they've got like real, sharp-looking jerseys. Everybody's name's on the back. It's very official. And what you really see is, it's kind of a who's who with all the executives now too, right? It's any GM you can name is sitting courtside. A lot of the superstar players come and watch their teammates. LeBron was out here. Wemby was out here. I mean, Kyrie Irving was out here. The list goes on. And we even had a nice run-in with the Timberwolves owner. And, Alex Rodriguez had a nice press conference and availability for some writers because he has just finished, purchasing the sale of that Timberwolves organization. So you never know who you're going to see. I think in the last week, I saw LeBron, Wemby, A-Rod, Magnus Carlsen, who's like the Michael Jordan of chess, Derrick Rose. I mean, where else are you ever going to have, that string of run-ins in like a 4-day period,
Well, you're running with a pretty cool crowd there, Ben. I will give you that. That is for sure. I want to talk about A-Rod because, of course, I'm a Timberwolves fan, strong connections, having lived in the Twin Cities, lots of family, friends there, and of course, the success of the Timberwolves over the last couple of years has been refreshing, given this is one of the long-suffering, inept franchises in the end, many decades. But A-Rod, I mean, he brings a cachet both as, one of the great baseball players of all time, but also coming into it as a new major league sports team owner, and obviously has some ideas. Number one, he's a great investor, because I believe I read where what he purchased the team for, and over the couple of years that it took to complete the transaction, the team's value doubled. So he's a good investor. So I'll have to get his portfolio. But talk about A-Rod and his impact that you think he'll have on this Minnesota franchise.
Well, let me just put my cards on the table. I was always a Jeter guy, not an A-Rod guy. I like the low key, steady
Yes.
winner, does all the right things, and I always kind of buy into the stereotypes about A-Rod. Oh, he's dating models and actresses, and maybe he's a little bit self-involved and big ego, and I think there was, some people would kind of question his intelligence at times too.
Yes.
And I'll tell you this: sitting down with him, I think all the stereotypes kind of just got blown away. I mean, I was really, really impressed. First of all, my impression was he's just a very serious businessman who has studied the craft. He was talking about learning from the Steinbrenners, learning from Magic Johnson, and just kind of being a sponge when it came to the business world. And so I think he's come by his success on that front very honestly. And I also could not believe how well prepared he was for dealing with the media. Now, obviously, he's been doing interviews for 20, 30 years, but I think he had a reputation of being a little bit chippy when he was a player, right? Maybe
Right.
not the most media friendly type of guy. And he was just laying out in very clear detail, aspects of the sale process, the goals for the Timberwolves, where they think they are in their championship window right now. He was pointing to lessons that they could learn from Oklahoma City after losing to them in the Western Conference Finals. And I was thinking to myself the whole time, this guy just sounds like an NBA owner. He doesn't sound like a former baseball player
Right.
who just wanted to be an owner, right? And so, to me, when I look at the Timberwolves, so much of the long-suffering stuff you're talking about was because of the previous owner, Glenn Taylor,
Correct.
not really wanting to spend big and not really investing in the team. Now, he made sure the franchise didn't leave town, and he kept them kind of in business, but it was never viewed as a marquee destination type organization. And I think with the Timberwolves, you saw this summer, they kept Julius Randle, they kept Naz Reid. They were able to keep the majority of their group together. They made a really interesting draft pick with the French center, Yohan Berenger, I think from France is how you say it. He's been playing great here in Summer League. And I've just never seen so much positive momentum around this organization the entire time I've been covering the league. So, to me, I came away from it thinking, hey, Minnesota's in good hands here. A-Rod's not like your conventional, typical NBA owner. He's not coming from the tech world. He's not a former player, NBA player, that is. But he's really committed to it. I think he's kind of fallen in love with it. He's gotten a taste of that playoff success these last couple of years. And he's always at every game sitting courtside, cheering on Anthony Edwards. And I think they're just in a really good spot as an organization. When you look at the list of teams that have a chance to win the championship next year, Minnesota's pretty close to the top of that list.
It's interesting to share a bit of a Minnesota storyline. Minnesota has this really interesting history of ownership in Major League Sports, starting with Calvin Griffith with the Minnesota Twins, phasing into Carl Pohlad, and then Glenn Taylor with the Timberwolves. And they all had that similar quality where they didn't want to spend money, big money, or the right money in the right way in order to build a championship team. That changed a little bit with the Twins as they got better at some points, but it wasn't because they spent a lot of money. They pretty much got lucky with a couple of their Hall of Fame players when they won the World Series back in the 80s. But to your point about A-Rod, he is not your typical Minnesota guy. And the fact, like you're describing, a very serious-minded businessman who really looked at sports owners that are at the top of the heap, or business owners, and learning his craft that way and applying all of the persistence and all of the determination that goes along with being a Hall of Fame player as he is. This is very different for Minnesota. And the way they line up right now going forward, I share with you that hope that I think with Glenn Taylor, you're always kind of holding your breath. Like, what's he going to do now? Is he going to bring these guys in and go, you know what, this is just too much money, let's get him out of here? But now it's a completely different mindset. And having also a superstar like Anthony Edwards, Minnesota's never had that kind of guy before.
Well, it's interesting because there's always this debate. Do you want to have the local owner who understands the community, or do you just want to have an outsider who maybe has a different perspective, a fresh perspective? And I think sometimes the outsider perspective, especially when I wouldn't call Minnesota like a toxic market, but they've had so many struggles with all of their teams over the years that, of course, the local fan base is going to be expecting the worst at all times, right? Like, you can't blame them for thinking, hey, something's about to go wrong, because for decades, a lot of things have gone wrong. And A-Rod is very much the Miami South Beach guy, right? I mean, he shows up and he's got this incredible tan and he's wearing the slick suits and the sunglasses, and you see him courtside in Minnesota and you're like, who is this guy? Like, where's he getting this tan? You know, there's no sunshine up there, right? And so, but I think it's actually worked out pretty well because that franchise needed a fresh perspective. There's no question about it. And, you know, you get into this idea of like, well, if expectations are low, sometimes as an organization, you play to expectations, right? It's like, well, if we don't have a winning culture, there's not pressure to do much of anything. And I think what A-Rod said is, no, all that stuff is going out the window. You know, we're serious. We want to do this. We understand the opportunity we've got with Anthony Edwards, where he has a chance to be an MVP level player. You know, the type of guy who can carry an organization all the way to the top. And we're not going to screw it up. And so you look at the moves they've made since they got Anthony Edwards. They've all been win now moves. Go trade for Gobert, right? Karl Anthony Towns' salary has to go, but make sure we get a player back with Julius Randle who could be a contributor and help to keep this team up. You know, make some aggressive draft day trades to fill out the rotation, right? Like, all these moves they've made have been to put Anthony Edwards in a position to win big now, not wait until his prime, right? It's like, we want you playing, you know, meaningful playoff games from the age of, you know, basically 21 on. And it's very similar, in a little bit of a different way, but it's a similar strategy to what the Celtics did with Tatum, right? Where it's like, hey, we got the super high pick. We're not going to wait for 5 years down the road. We're going to just make sure this guy's getting playoff reps, and eventually he's going to win a title because he's gone back so many times. I think that's Minnesota's strategy right now. They're waiting for the opportunity to pounce and maybe make you know, one more move to get them over the hump, because I still think Oklahoma City's better. But this is such a far cry from what Glenn Taylor was doing, which is, let's just avoid the luxury tax. If we win 20 games, who cares? Go years and years without making the playoffs. It's not the end of the world. And this is a very different deal.
It really is. And for Minnesota fans, this is a ray of sunshine that they literally have never had. And to have somebody this serious-minded on the heels of 2 conference final performances bodes really well for the future. So really excited to hear about not just Minnesota, but some of these other teams, Ben, in the NBA that are really, I think, seismically changing the face and nature of the league and the way the powers that be aligns. I mean, of course, OKC is now the supernova in the smallest of small markets, and have, I think, just sent a message out to the rest of the league that, you know, not only are we good now, but we're planning on staying really good. In fact, we're planning on getting better. But one thing I'd love your commentary on is, I've been very impressed with the Western Conference and the way some of the top competitors have responded and have shifted their lineups makeup in the offseason as they prepare to do battle in 25-26.
Well, yeah, I would look at Denver as one of those winners. You know, I think the Michael Porter Jr. trade just had to be done, and the timing of it and the way they did it was excellent. You know, they switched front offices. They finally replaced Calvin Booth, and those guys just didn't waste any time. I thought they were very self-aware about how the Nuggets weren't deep enough to quite get over the top against Oklahoma City. And now not only do you get Cam Johnson back for Michael Porter, so you're basically getting the same type of player for half the price. You have a backup center in Valanciunas, which has been a huge need for them for Jokic's entire prime. They get another shooter with Tim Hardaway Jr. coming off the bench to give them a little pop. And they also bring in Bruce Brown, who I think is just like a more stable version of Russell Westbrook, who was a part of their championship team. So they went from a team that had basically like 4 players you could trust in the playoffs. Now they look like they have an 8-man rotation. Now they look like they have the ability to maybe keep some minutes off of Joker during the regular season so he can be a little bit more fresh for the playoffs. So I really like what Denver did. And then I would suspect the other team you were thinking about maybe would be the Clippers, in terms of adding Brook Lopez as a backup center and then grabbing Bradley Beal with a buyout. This is an older team. It's a team that's kind of struggled to get out of the first round, especially because of Kawhi's injuries. But now they've got a group where it's a lot of talent on paper. They have a great coach. They definitely got better compared to last year's roster. They also brought in John Collins from Utah. I should have mentioned him. So they probably upgraded their talent as well, and they should be a bigger threat next year too. So I would circle those two. Houston would be the other obvious one. I'm curious for your take, though, because when I look back at the championship teams from the last 10 years, they have had a great foundational piece, right? I mean, a great prime level star type guy who can really do it. And if you look back to me at the last 10 NBA champions, I'm not sure a single one, I think every single one of those teams had a player who was better than Kevin Durant is right now. And so what I worry with the Rockets is they make this big bet on Kevin Durant. They build this great team around him, going out to grab Capella and Dorian Finney-Smith and a lot of smart moves. But if you can't trust your very best player to get you through these playoff series, and I don't really trust Kevin Durant to do that at this stage of his career, I wonder if they're destined to fall on their face a little bit when it really gets tough, the second round Western Conference Finals and finals, because Kevin Durant hasn't been back to the conference finals since he left Golden State, and he's going to be 37 years old, right? So, I wonder, like, if I had to rank them, I'd have Denver over Houston personally. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota could beat Houston in a playoff series either. And I definitely would take Oklahoma City over Houston. So I know the Rockets got a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement, a lot of hype this summer. But I'm curious if you think Kevin Durant can actually take them to the promised land.
No. I'll go black and white. Father Time was included in all of the trades and all of the moves for Houston and for Bradley Beal for the Clippers. Clippers remind me of the Lakers when they picked up Gary Payton, Karl Malone, and got really old and experienced, right. and it just bombed spectacularly. To me, the Clippers, I'm not saying that will happen with them, Ben. Beal obviously has been a complete bust in Phoenix. It's not that he can't play. It's just that he's never been healthy enough to play. And their culture, I imagine, is as bad as their record makes it look. So with the Clippers, with the coach they have, with some of the teammates, health being an issue, but I think the age really works against them. And in the case of Durant in Houston, I'm with you 100%. Like, I mean, KD hasn't been back since he was with Golden State to the finals. Not only that, he can't play a full season. His body's betraying him in a way that, that is indicative of a guy who's aging out of his prime. He's not LeBron James. Nobody's LeBron James. And you can play longer now because people train better. There's better techniques. There's better everything, nutrition, equipment, on and on and on. But certain bodies break down faster. And it appears Durant is still great when he's feeling good and he's playing. But you can look at his last few seasons, and that's well short of the 82-game regular season. It's 20 to 40 under that. And then you get to the playoffs after a long season. I'm not buying in that's your guy. Because like you said, that isn't Steph Curry. That isn't LeBron James. That isn't Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That isn't the Joker. There's none of that. Antetokounmpo. He's not in the same breath as those guys at this stage of his career.
The other aspect I would add to what you just said there brilliantly was he's made some real concessions in his game. It's really, he's not attacking the rim much anymore at all. It's very, very jumper dependent, and he's the best mid-range jump shooter in the league, him or Shea. So it's not like those are bad shots. But then when that's all you're getting, you're
Right.
not putting as much pressure on the defense, right?
Right.
The playmaking aspect in Phoenix, like they never had the chemistry, right? They weren't really moving the basketball. It was way too much my turn, your turn stuff. And I think that could definitely be a carryover problem in Houston when you're looking at guys like, Van Vliet. They need more connectors, I think, offensively than maybe they have. So I still worry that Houston's going to have some offensive challenges. Now, maybe Şengün's in that role, but I'm not sure. I mean, the last time KD played with a center who was a playmaker was probably like Andrew Bogut, and I don't know.
Right.
You're going back a ways, right? There's going to need to be some adjustments. And then defensively, think about how much energy the Thunder expended in this playoffs playing defense. I mean, they just exhausted the Timberwolves, who we were talking about earlier. They barely outlasted the Pacers, who themselves were just like this incredibly, endurance from a team standpoint defensively. Katie just does not work that hard defensively anymore, and he's one of my favorite players of all time. So I hate to bag on him, but I think it's important to have honest expectations going into the year and making it through 4 long, grueling playoff series where you have to guard every possession. That's going to be asking a lot. Now, the one thing I do like with the Rockets, they got a lot of length. They got Finney Smith, they got Jabari Smith, they got Katie, they got Capella now defensively. Like, if they want to go long and big, and you could put Ahmed Thompson at the 1 there, you could have some crazy lineup combinations with that group. But I'm still not sure it's going to be enough.
Well, and it's a bit of an antithesis to what the Thunder are doing in terms of developing their talent young, bringing them into the system, and strategically adding a piece here and there that's more complementary than primary. And I think with the Rockets adding the primary piece at a 37-year-old guy who's seen his best days physically, and like you said, isn't in a position to be that interested in being a lockdown defender. They have length, and I agree with you. They have some compelling lineup opportunities here, and they will be tough. Now, they lose some defensive cachet with Dylan Brooks being gone. I mean, Amen Thompson's one of the outstanding wing defenders. Finney Smith, same. So they're going to be tough. They're going to be good. Whether they'll be good enough in a stacked West, I'm with you. Like, I'm picking them 4th, 5th in that range, because I think the other teams should be better if they stay healthy. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it could be one of those things where, like, maybe their defense gets them a higher seed during the regular season. But if you're trying to say championship odds from the West, I'm with you. I think they're probably 4th on my list.
Yeah, absolutely. You're listening to the Basketball Show Deep Dive. Paul Sir here with Ben Golliver of the Washington Post. We're talking summertime fun stuff as it relates to the NBA. Ben's down in Las Vegas right now at the Summer League. So before we jump into the Summer League, though, I got to ask you one question. This kind of goes back to something you and I have touched on when I've mentioned to you, because of when I first met you, you were writing for Sports Illustrated, and they had that wonderful column, and I don't even know if they still do. When the apocalypse is upon you, when Devin Booker signs the largest contract per annum in NBA history, when the Suns didn't even have to sign him to a contract. I just, those zeros are so imposing. And of course, I mean, we're not talking about the real world. We're talking about the NBA world, and zeros mean something totally different in that world. But what do you think that's a good move for the Suns? Is it a move on their part to at least provide the slightest modicum of an appearance of stability in one of the most dysfunctional cultures in the NBA? Was it a good move? Was it a needless move? Or was it a bad move?
I didn't like it. I'll say this: being here in Vegas, no ownership group has gotten more, snickers and criticism from other people in the NBA community than the Suns. Like, they're kind of
I bet.
the number one punching bag right now. Obviously, they've been cycling through coaches and front offices, and they're hiring, all these people from Michigan State because that's where their owner, kind of went. And so there's just a lot of people who think these guys really don't know what they're doing. Now, they had to buy out Bradley Beal basically $100 million. That's always a bad sign when you're doing something like that, especially when you just traded it for him a couple of years ago. but they have the semblance of a new era building. This idea of like, hey, we got Kevin Durant out, we got Bradley Beal out. That formula didn't work. We got a lot cheaper, and now we're going to build around Devin Booker. The problem is Devin Booker's not good enough to build around. He's not a franchise player. He's very popular down there in Phoenix, and so I think that's why they did it. It's kind of a win the press conference move. It's not a win finals games move, you know. And he made the finals once, and when they did, there was a big debate: is this Booker's team or is this Chris Paul's team? And I would just screamed at everybody who would listen. This is Chris Paul's team. Chris Paul is the one who's driving the wins here. And sure enough, as soon as Chris Paul left, that team has not had near enough success. And Devin Booker really has not evolved his game in many ways. It's not all his fault. What you've seen is that there's a lot of people who can be about 75% as good as Devin Booker at what he does and earn 25% the price, right? I mean, he's a scoring guard who's not a great playmaker for his teammates, who's not a great defensive player. There are so many good scoring guards in the modern NBA, and offense has taken off so high that it's just not that valuable of an archetype, right? Unless you're a more physical player, unless you could play both sides of the basketball like an Anthony Edwards, you're just not going to be able to win at a high level if that's what your best player looks like, right? You need the playmaking guys with the ball in their hands, right? You need the big physical wings to drive success. And so Phoenix, it's one of those things where it's like, well, congratulations that you locked your guy up. You're not going to matter at any point of this contract. Like, you don't have the ability to retool this thing and be a winner. And so if you're Booker, of course you sign it because it's, you know, like you said, a record contract and you're living a great life. But I think from what people were hoping for Booker when he first really emerged in that 21 finals and that 21 playoffs as kind of like a bigger time player, I think people had a lot higher hopes for him than where he's ended up 5 years later.
Well, and I think you hit the key name on the head, and that's Chris Paul. Chris Paul, a la Steve Nash, a la John Stockton, make players better than they really are. And when he lost that teammate running alongside him, he then his water table settled down to where his ability really is. I mean, he's Anthony Edwards size without, well, none of us have Anthony Edwards ability. That, you know, he's one of the great athletes ever to play the sport. And Devin's not that kind of athlete. He's good, but you're right. He's good, but he's not quite a dime a dozen, but not far off that, and not enough to build a franchise around. But you did hit something that I think, to give them the slightest bit of grace with their new efforts in an absolute tailspin of a franchise, is you kind of got to just close your eyes, put the TNT around it, and push the lever down and blow the damn thing up and see what's going to start coming out on the other end. And if you've got a guy that's popular, at least they've locked him in. And like you said, they'll win the press conference as they try to find their way to retool.
Yeah, I think ultimately, though, that's a fan base that wants to be there for wins. You know, it's not a fan base that's always there during the losing seasons. And I suspect as they go forward a couple of years, you know, I think last year Matt Ishbia came out with the cheap concessions. You know, like, hey, it's like $1 hot dogs or $1 sodas or whatever. And
I was trying to be optimistic, Ben. Yeah. You're shattering it, but you're right.
I think there's a chance
right.
Free soda at the arena, you know, if you buy a ticket in a couple
Never
of
a
years.
good sign. But you go to an Oilers game, it's $20 for a beer. So,
well, I mean, here's the thing. It's a great lesson that when you're a new owner, you can't just go in guns blazing thinking you're the smartest guy in the room,
right?
You know? And that's something Alex Rodriguez said. He didn't trade for Kevin Durant this summer. They looked at it, but they didn't do it. They didn't want to make the massive, you know, move if it didn't make complete sense. And what was the very first thing that Matt Ishbia did when he got to Phoenix? It was to trade for Kevin Durant and then trade for Bradley Beal. Those moves haunted them for years, and they're going to continue haunting them because they don't have draft picks, and they're going to be having a really, really hard time assembling talent around Devin Booker. So I feel for him. You know, I really enjoyed it when Kevin first got there because I was thinking, hey, this is another contender with a big time star player that's like a couple, you know, an hour flight from LA. This is awesome. And it just never materialized as I thought. And I think that that's going to be a franchise that's really struggling for relevance here as they go forward.
Going back to the apocalypse metaphor, it is a weird year when you're willing to spend $100 million to get rid of Bradley Beal, or Damian Lillard gets it for very different reasons. He's getting $22 million a year, and Portland, with their hope for franchise piece, who also came from the dysfunctional Phoenix world, that should tell you something, also dumps Ayton, who ends up with the Lakers. And you and I had a good conversation last time about it. But there's a lot of shifting. And don't you think, Ben, that so much of that is due to the success of OKC and of Indiana, and franchises now hopping on the bandwagon of restructuring and thinking, man, we got to make some seismic shifts in the way our teams are put together for us to ever be competitive in the new NBA.
Well, yeah, the other factor that's driving it is the second apron salary cap rules, right? Where it's basically just saying, hey, if you're going to spend a lot of money on star level players, it's going to be hard for you to create depth because the rules are so restrictive, and you're also going to be paying through the nose in ways that you never had to pay through the nose before if you get into luxury tax territory, right? And so what Milwaukee is saying is like, well, we can't afford to have Damian Lillard's, salary, $50 million sitting on our books where he's not playing, because we can't put enough talent around Giannis. Even if we had a magic wand, we legally couldn't get enough good players around him to make it work. And so that was the genius, by the way, for both Oklahoma City and Indiana, is they had no bad contracts on their teams. And they had a whole bunch of young guys who weren't making a bunch of money. So that's why they're deep. That's why they're playing this incredible style. It's a very team friendly salary cap sheet, and they're providing great value, and they're beating a lot of teams that have bigger star players because they don't have any bad contracts holding them back. So Oklahoma City is going forward into a more challenging era. They had to extend Shea and Chet and Jalen Williams this summer. The numbers are astronomical. The good news for them is they're still going to have a little bit of a window here for the next year or two where they're going to keep the band together, but eventually they're going to have to make some really tough choices about who do they keep and who do they trade. For teams that were backed into a corner already, I'm thinking Boston, which had a huge payroll, Milwaukee, which had the big payroll, Phoenix, which had the big payroll. The whole modus operandi this summer was just get cheaper, by any means necessary. We got to clear some of these things out. And so, it winds up being a transition year. And even a team like the Lakers, you think, oh, we got Luka and LeBron. Years ago, that would mean it's shopping spree time, right? Like the Lakers are going out to get everyone who's available, and it's just going to be time for them to load up. But it's not how the NBA works anymore. This is how Adam Silver wants it. He wants more parity. Every team is going to have a chance, and we'll see, whether the fans respond. Because in my opinion, fans like dynasties. Fans like super teams. They really want to rally around that. That's what gets everybody super excited. And, we'll see if Adam Silver's vision, which is kind of borrowing from the NFL, where it's like any given Sunday, a different team can win. We'll see if the fans, come around to that. But I know an awful lot of people who were raised on Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson, Larry Bird and Bill Russell and Kareem. And they were raised on those guys because they won the championships over and over, and these days, Jokic gets one, Giannis gets one, Shea gets one, Tatum gets one. And, we don't have any super teams. And we'll see if the fans, adjust it and like it, or if they want to go back to the way the NBA was always done.
No, I think you're right, Ben. I mean, when you look back at that Golden State team that won a championship without Kevin Durant, but then they get KD, I think a lot of people at first were saying, well, is this going to work? Well, not only did it work, it raised the interest level about that team to an unbelievable, peak. And unfortunately, the second year, KD blows out his Achilles. But you're right. This new model, to have two small market teams like Indiana and OKC, unthinkable 5 years ago. But now it's not only very real. There's a ton of small market teams that are getting better and better because the playing field has been leveled with this second apron system that Silver has put into place.
Yeah, and he's sticking to it. We had a press conference with Adam Silver yesterday, and he made it very clear. I'm happy with the way the system is going. It's working as intended. We still think Oklahoma City has a chance to be a dynasty if they want to be. So it's not like dynasties are dead forever. He was sticking to his guns, and we just have to track interest. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. What do television ratings look like? What does social media interest look like? Can some of these younger star players evolve and get to be as big as LeBron and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant were? That's kind of an open question. The NBA is kind of waiting for somebody like Wemby to take that next jump. And, they need it, honestly, because,
Yeah, they do.
right now it still feels like the biggest stars are guys who are inching closer to retirement.
Well, and add into that, you got Luca, you've got Nikola, and then what? Like that, like you say, there's kind of a chasm in there right now. So let's transfer over to the summer league. Cooper Flag plays 2 summer league games, has a abysmal shooting night the first night. It's a first summer league game, for goodness sakes. It doesn't matter, but shows flashes of the skill set that he possesses, and then has 31 in game 2 before Dallas shuts him down. Ben Golliver, what do you think of Cooper Flag? How do you feel this snapshot presents itself as you look forward to the next season?
Oh, I'm just all in on Cooper Flag. I think he's a really, really special player. He's the youngest guy in Summer League. He's the youngest guy in his draft class. He was the best player on the court for both of his games. He went heads up against the San Antonio Spurs against Carter Bryant, an excellent perimeter defensive prospect. And he had a couple of, struggles early, but by the end of the night, he had 30 plus points and he was kind of doing whatever he wanted. What really stood out to me in Las Vegas was his fluidity end to
Yes,
end. Reminds me of a soccer player, like a midfielder who kind of goes box to box, right?
right.
Where he can turn defense into offense so quickly. He gets back so well in transition after offensive plays. And his activity level, he's always the hardest playing on the court. He's been the most talented player on the court as well. That's a pretty rare combination in basketball. And there's just really no major holes. You were correct to say he didn't shoot the ball very well here in Vegas, and so he still needs to kind of prove that he can, be a knockdown shooter. But he was very willing to shoot, and he was not overwhelmed by the hype and the excitement. A couple of years ago, Wemby was a little bit, put off, I think, by all the excitement around his summer league debut, and he did not play very well. Cooper came out and just sort of dominated the action from the opening go so much that his coach had a comment saying, well, our other guys were standing around and just watching Cooper, and they needed to get a little bit more flow into it in the second half, and they were able to do that. The Mavericks were. So I think if you're Dallas, you put the ball in his hands for Summer League. He didn't turn it over a lot. He made the right pass time and time again. He showed some of his ability to create shots and get downhill. He had some above the rim moments on offense. He played great defense the whole time, had a game-winning block shot in the Lakers game. It's just, he only played 2 games, but he didn't need to show anything else. It's like, this guy is the real deal. We all know he's the real deal. And I think the only question becomes, like, he's such a prodigy, right? He's going to be the favorite for Rookie of the Year, even though he's the youngest rookie in his class. The question becomes, like, how long until he's ready to be a franchise player, how long until he's the best player on that Dallas roster? Because they got Anthony Davis, they've got Kyrie, they've got some real talent. But would it be crazy if we fast forwarded 2 years and it was Cooper Flag was the best player on that team? I don't think that would be crazy. And it's pretty wild to think, he's coming in, Anthony Davis is a top 75 all-time player. He's theoretically still in his prime, won a championship not that long ago. And, Cooper Flag could be better than him, say by 2026.
I agree. And you read my mind. I said, in my mind, it's going to take him 2 years to round his game out. He's already got the fluidity, and I think that is such a great word that you use that you just can't appreciate about Cooper Flag's game until you watch him several times and you realize how fluid he is in all aspects of the game. Like, everything flows together. If it requires him to handle the ball, he handles the ball. If it requires a specific pass, he makes it. If he has a wide open 3, if he has a 3, he'll take it, or he'll go and pull up, or he'll get to the rim. He'll lock a guy down. He'll block a shot from the weak side. The fluidity, the intelligence, the feel, unteachable, absolutely unteachable. And the grace in which he expresses that on the court at his age I really haven't seen that, because when LeBron came in, he was so developed physically and obviously one of the great basketball minds of all time, Ben. But this is just a little different. This is just a little higher level, I think, in terms of Cooper Flagg's overall understanding and feel of the game of basketball and his ability to do literally almost everything really well.
He's incredibly smart, a great spatial awareness. He kind of understands where everybody else is on the court. I would say he doesn't have LeBron's pure vision and highlight pass capability, right? Like you don't see
Right.
him like threading a pass through three defenders to that weak side corner for a shot or something like that. But man, he generates a lot of open shots for his teammates just by drawing two defenders and making the simple read, right? And anytime he's going to the basket, you got to send help because he's a threat to dunk it on you. So the fact that he enjoys making the right pass is refreshing, because I think there's a lot of playmaking lead guards or wings who want to make the flashy pass, or they know that they're like kind of obligated, to pass the basketball to their teammates. And Cooper, it's like a very pure desire to pass the ball. He balances his own scoring and his teammates' scoring so well. And one other interesting thing that I noticed in summer league, both Khan Knipple and Kaman Maluak, the two other Duke players who were taken in the top 10, they did not play very well. They
Right.
did not really shine. Now, Khan had a decent game yesterday. I think it was like Tuesday, or maybe it was Monday. All the days are running together. But his first outing was not impressive at all. And it made me think, I wonder if this is the Cooper Flag effect, right? Where his ability to lift his teammates and make them look even better than they were was coming through leaps and bounds at Duke, where he had these incredible advanced stats, the on-off impact numbers. Anytime he was on the court, Duke was killing the opponent, basically, was how it went, right? And I wonder if Khan and Maluak, if we're going to look back and say, maybe those guys got overdrafted a little bit because they were lucky enough to play with Cooper. But that's a sign of a great, leader and player. I mean, LeBron, how many guys did he get paid over the years, right? With his ability to set them up, and the Mo Williamses of the world and the Kyle Korvers of the world keep getting contracts because they're playing off of LeBron. I think Cooper could have a similar impact, even if he doesn't have quite the same pure vision.
It's interesting you say that, because when I was watching Khan play, and I was, seeing how high he was being considered in the draft, and when he went to the Hornets, my first thought was, oh, I hope it's not Adam Morrison again. Like
Yeah.
where a guy comes in with the expectations are so high, but Khan doesn't bring that elite NBA athleticism. He's more the JJ Redick type athlete. And so it will be interesting to see how the Hornets coaching staff are able to create structures and situations for Khan so he can be a real effective contributor. He's a great player, obviously.
He is a great player. Yeah, I don't want to be too down on him. I'm
not either. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just want him to succeed. I just hope, like so many situations, Ben, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's so many situations where the player goes to the wrong team that doesn't understand how to take his specific talent set. Like Cooper, it's easier with Cooper because of, he just has it all. But most players don't. And if you don't end up with the right coach or the right system, a lot of times that can really impact their ability to develop into their peak self.
I mean, 100%. We've seen a lot of careers go to die in Charlotte.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Now, I do like their coach, Charles Lee, their new coach, and I do think Khan fits the style of play they want to play, which is move the basketball, generate a ton of threes, and take a lot of threes. I think my biggest concern with Khan at Summer League was he was just smaller than I expected. I thought he was going to be one of these, relatively big wings, coming in, and he just looked shorter than I thought he was, and he didn't have that same physical impact. You could even see it when he's like closing out to shooters. Guys are getting the threes up over the top of his arm because he's just not quite, long and big enough to really contest those shots. So that is a new concern I have about Khan. But in terms of his feel, intelligence, smarts, unselfishness, scoring ability, big shot making that he showed at Duke, like he's got a lot of that, very interesting, very important skill set. The question for me is, maybe Charlotte just needs to trade LaMelo, start fresh. Could you have a core with Khan, Brandon Miller and whatever point guard you could get for LaMelo that maybe would fit the style of play that Charles Lee wants to play better. Maybe it'd be a little bit more of a functional and reliable locker room as well. I think there's still some maturity issues with LaMelo, obviously health concerns with LaMelo. I wonder if we would look more favorably on Kahn's fit in Charlotte if LaMelo wasn't there.
I totally agree with you, because LaMelo is just, there's just that wild card instability that you got to live with, and you're going to get 30 and 12 one night, and you're going to get 18 on 32 shots the next, and so you really just don't know what you're going to get night to night. The unpredictability is really, really tough. I do have one other final question regarding Summer League for you, Ben. Is who else are there any surprises? Are there any of the draft picks that you've watched, or any of the undrafted players that have just come directly from the NCAA that have stood out to you, that have people raising their eyebrows and saying, you know what, that guy can really play. I can see a future for him in this league. Are there a couple of those guys that have stood out to you?
Well, I think the Behringer, the French kid for Minnesota, really had a great first impression where he came out the first game and had like 4 block shots in the first couple minutes, and everybody was like, whoa. I mean, now you can really see it. Also with Minnesota, he's not exactly coming from off the radar, but Terrence Shannon, who was able to get a little bit of playing time during the playoff rotation as it unfolded once, Chris Finch needed some more wings. He has really dominated on this level, which is what you would hope, because, he's in his mid-20s. He went to college for a number of years, and he's playing playoff minutes. But he really had an impressive run through Summer League, and I think that's got Minnesota fans excited, because they're thinking, wait a minute, if you had those guys plus Rob Dillingham maybe in a bigger role now that Nickeil Alexander-Walker is gone, this could be a pretty exciting team with some, interesting pieces. And not only that, maybe Minnesota could say, well, now we have a plan for post-Gobert if Behringer can really be a player too, right? So I think that was some of the bigger, positive storylines coming out that maybe people didn't expect. I think also, the Chinese center, Yang Hansen for Portland.
Yes.
He's got a lot of fans really excited. I mean, Portland just needs something to cheer for, and he certainly has the quirky personality and a very interesting and skilled offensive game that has really won him a lot of fans. And so I think if you're talking about like fan favorites in the building, I think Yang might be number one in Vegas. He has a little charisma to him, even though he doesn't speak a lot of English, and everybody is just sort of rooting for him to succeed, I think is how I would say it.
It's very cool to see that, because his passing is very unique, kind of Jokic-like. He has that tendency. He can see angles. He can see cutters. He has a quirky game, and he has a floppy demeanor, kind of almost, there's a little bit of Maravich in there that I see.
Yeah.
Pretty easy. Pretty easy to root for a guy. But what I love is rooting for a guy named Young Hansen. Like, I just think that's great in and of itself. Is you've got a player from China, his name's Hansen. I just think that's great. That's going back to what was the hot slap shot, the Hansen brothers. So this is just great to have this kind of quirkiness coming into the league. Well, Ben, unfortunately, we're out of time, and I always say that sincerely, unfortunately, because this could go on for days from my standpoint. So, thanks so much for your time today, and I hope the rest of the Summer League is enjoyable as it has been to this point. And I look forward to catching up again real soon and getting your thoughts and observations on what you're seeing that's going to be shaking out for the next season in the NBA.
That sounds great. Always great to chat with you. Have a wonderful week. If I'll be heading off the grid here soon, so we probably won't chat for a bit. But until then, I look forward to it. Likewise.
Ben Golliver, Washington Post, joining me on the Deep Dive on the Basketball Show. Thank you for joining me for this special edition of the Basketball Show's Deep Dive. You can listen to the Basketball Show live every Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon Mountain Time on Sports 1440 in Edmonton and sports1440.ca all across Canada. Our podcasts are available on all of your favorite podcast providers. Watch for my blog, 3 from Deep, on my website, 3x3ba.ca. The Deep Dive has been brought to you by the Hoop City 3x3 Basketball Festival, July 31st to August 3rd in the Ice Palace in West Edmonton Mall. I'm your host, Paul Sir. Have a great week on and off the court.